instead of the camera. Let's try that again. Good day. Thank you so much for joining me. I know this is really kind of a weird day for me to be going live because it's Thursday and you're so often seeing these lives on Friday. So thank you so much for being accommodating. If you are here live, please say hi in the comments. If you are catching the replay, let me know you're catching the replay. And as always, the replay is just as good as being here live. You still get all of the goodies. You just don't get to interact with me as I'm going through and teaching you. So today we're continuing. I mean, this has been quite the journey for us thus far, looking through and uncovering and exploring all of these different feelings and emotions and what their energetic properties or output is, meaning the vibration they tend to emanate from your body. And I wanted to just extend my appreciation. Last week I simply wasn't able to be here for personal reasons, and so many of you were so understanding, and I really want to thank you for that. So as promised, we are going to go the next step in our journey of feelings and emotions, and we're going to be discussing grief today, which I know is a topic that a lot of you are going to relate to, and I hope to shed a little bit of light on it. Some of you will know a lot about grief. Some of you might have an idea about it, but not really have an understanding. And others might think they know, but don't actually know. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to get started. First and foremost, pulling out my notes, because if I don't have notes, then I'm just kind of all over the place, and we don't want that, do we? So let me just pull those up. Dun, dun, dun. Okay, so like we have discussed along the way, each of these emotions or feelings have an energetic output, a frequency, and we've started from shame. We're working all the way up to peace, shame being a energetic output of 20 and peace being an energetic output of 1,000. So grief is moving us up the ladder. We are at a 75. So we are quickly crawling and transcending and transmuting one emotion to another, and we've landed here at grief. So let's dive right in. I'm going to try and keep this shorter today. I always say that, but I mean, who knows? Let's see where we land. Okay, so why might you be here? Why might you be attending this particular live, not life, although life, appropriate grief. Anyways, I'm getting sidetracked. So if you have experienced profound loss in your life and you have found the journey towards healing and acceptance difficult, this might be one of those reasons that you've chosen to watch this particular live, where it's striking a chord or it's resonating with you. I talked to so many of you here in the group and in the community, and there are so many of you that have gone through loss so much in your life, and so much so that it's had an impact in the present moment, even if it happened 15, 20 years ago, 5 years ago, 2 months ago. No matter the time, there seems to be a general feeling of having difficulty moving forward and moving beyond it. So that might be one of the reasons that you've chosen to attend today. Perhaps you find yourself in this period of grief, and it's taken over your whole body, mind, and soul so much that you are starting to view the world through a lens of sadness or grief, where you're having difficulty seeing the joy in life and wanting to be a part of that, and increasing your own vibration and being able to be and live joyfully, because you're being kind of kept in this bubble of grief and sadness. And we want to try very gently to move you out of that and get you towards joy. If you've been finding it difficult to tap into joy simply because, you've been encompassed by grief for so long, first of all, I want to normalize and validate that, because grief for everybody is going to take a different amount of time. There is no set point, and we'll talk about this a lot during our live today. There's no amount of time. There's no, okay, you've gone through mourning or grieving for 6 months. That's it. That's all you get. It doesn't work like that. It takes as long as it takes. And if you're still feeling that way, still feeling like you can't find the joy in life because you're suffering from grief, I want you to know it's because that period isn't over for you, but it's not forever. It is not forever. It does not have to be that way. You can move through it in a really healthy way that is accommodating for your needs and is supportive for what you're going through. But I want you to be able to start to find those periods of joy again, even if it just starts off as that little pockets of joy here and there. And if you're thinking to yourself, I should be over grief. It's been 10 years. It's been 12 years. It's been 6 months. I should be over this. you might be attending this live today because you're hoping that you can get some validation. And again, I've just validated it. There's no specific amount of time. Everybody is different, but again, we can take steps to move forward, to move through it. Now, if you have an awareness, I mean, this could be you, that you are aware that you are feeling trapped, like the grief is just kind of like a cloud over your entire body, mind, and soul, and that you can't get out from under it. If that is you, like you're feeling trapped and it's sort of burying you beneath it, like it's just weighing on those shoulders, I want to help alleviate that and have you find ways and techniques that you can kind of manage it. But again, I say manage in a very gentle way, because this is, again, so different, so unique for every single person. And if you're ready to begin that healing process, if you have finally come to a place of acceptance, of readiness, where you feel it in your heart and you say to yourself, you know what, I've been grieving for this long, I've been mourning for this period of time, and I'm ready to start to release the guilt associated with moving forward and really start taking those baby steps. I'm hoping that you'll get a lot out of today's live, but those are some of the reasons you might be attending today. As always, I really like to go over these because I want everyone to have an understanding of some of the varying different reasons why people attend specific lives, and it's so different for everybody, and that is something that I love about this community and this group. So before we can move forward in talking about some of these things, we need to define grief, and they're a little bit long today, so you'll have to bear with me. I'm going to have to look down and read them. But the American Psychological Association, apparently I can't speak today, defines grief as the anguish experienced after significant loss, usually the death of a beloved person. Grief is often distinguished from bereavement and mourning, and we're going to go into detail about that later. Not all bereavements result in strong grief response, and not all grief is given public expression. Grief often includes physiological distress, separation anxiety, confusion, yearning, dwelling on the past, apprehension or anxiety about the future. Intense grief can become life-threatening through disruption of the immune system, can become life-threatening through the disruption of, I read the same sentence twice, immune system, self-neglect, or suicidal ideation. Grief may also take the form of regret for something lost, remorse for something done, or sorrow for a mishap to oneself. Therefore, grief is the normal process of reacting to loss. Now, I know that's a really big, huge description, but there were pieces I just did not want to leave out. I wanted to provide you exactly what was provided by the American Psychological Association. So we've now defined grief, but there's also two other definitions that I want us to go over, because they're often, grief, mourning, and bereavement are often used interchangeably, but they are different. Grief is the normal process of reacting to loss. Bereavement is the period after a loss during which grief is experienced. This is dependent on the closeness of the person who passed and how much time was spent anticipating the loss. Long anticipation could result in a shorter bereavement process, meaning if perhaps you have, a loved one that has been suffering, that has been ill, and you know that loss is imminent, the bereavement period might be shorter because you've been anticipating it, you've been preparing yourself, you've been readying yourself for it. So the actual period after the loss, it might be shorter because there's been an expectation there. Whereas if it's sudden, that period of loss might be a bit longer because it was out of the blue. So sorting through and sifting through the emotions are going to take a longer period of time. Now, mourning is different in the sense that it's the outward expression of deep sorrow for someone who has passed on. So, and it's usually based on culture and tradition. For example, mourning for somebody might look like wearing black, and in some traditions perhaps wearing white or wearing a specific color, or some cultures I believe were lots of bright colors, and it's for a specific amount of time. That is mourning. So hopefully you can tell the difference between all three of them, because there is a difference even though they're used interchangeably. But What is important to remember here, and I want us to keep this in mind as we're going through this live, is that grief doesn't necessarily only mean death or loss of a loved one or a person in your life. It can be the loss of a friendship, the loss of a career, or the ending of a job. It could be a decline in your own personal health. It could be a loss of innocence that you're grieving. There are all sorts of ways that grief can show up for us. But I think obviously, as we're all taught, that the greatest one we think of when we think of grief, we associate it with death or with dying or passing of a loved one. But it can mean a lot of different things, and people can have periods of mourning and feel grief and have bereavement time for any of these things. So I really want you to keep that in the back of your mind, that there are different forms of loss. And even though it might not necessarily be death, grief can be triggered the same way in which losing a loved one would trigger grief. So I really want us to be sensitive to that. I want you to be sensitive to that. If you're supporting somebody that's going through a period of grief and you're kind of looking at them like, nobody died, what's the problem? You know, we want to be very, very sensitive, because what we define as something to be grieving over is going to be different than somebody else. And it's really, really abundantly important that we never judge someone going through grief, or we never say to somebody like, and perhaps if you've been in this set of circumstances where you've lost a loved one, or you've lost a career, relationship, friendship, and somebody's just been like, well, get over it. Or they've said something minimizing like, time heals all wounds. Like, come on, that is not the way we want to support somebody, because whether you think it's something to be grieving or they think it's something to be grieving, it's very real to them. Even though you might differ in terms of, okay, maybe that wouldn't trigger grief in me, it is for them. So we really need to be respectful of that and non-judgmental. And remember, each of us are going to grieve differently. It's going to look different for you. It's going to look different for me. Everybody is different. So it's important, if you're supporting somebody, if you're lending an ear, if you want to be someone that is there for someone that is grieving, no matter what the loss is, that you are non-judgmental and that you are there for them, to be a listening ear and not try and push some sort of agenda or try and make them feel better or try and, you know, force joy or peace on them. You really need to meet somebody that's grieving right where they're at and be sure you're being vulnerable with them, you're being present with them, and you're catering to what it is they need in that moment, and not just trying to offer platitudes or, oh, it's okay, and don't worry, it'll pass, and all of that. You know, these are not helpful ways of being. Support is what they need. Being present is what they need. Knowing that they aren't being judged is what they need. So your particular perception doesn't matter. What does matter is them and what they're going through. So that is something I do want to clarify. Now, I had tossed around the idea just before we move on, because I wanted to talk about some lessons we learned from the grief process. I wanted to take a minute, because I thought everyone would want to hear about the 5 stages of grief, but then I was like, wait a minute, you know, like, that's so out there. Everybody knows it. It's like the popular model of grief. And then I thought, okay, well, maybe I'll discuss some other models of grief. But really and truly, I don't think, like, I could provide that education. I could provide I lost my train of thought. I could provide that information, that education piece, but ultimately I feel like that isn't exactly why you're here, to learn a formal education around the 5 stages of grief or the 6 hours of mourning or any of these things. So I'm going to move right along to the next piece, which is lessons we learn from grief. But I wanted to put that caveat out there, because I know maybe a lot of you might be expecting, oh, she's going to talk about the 5 stages of grief. But I mean, that is an important theory, and it's one that has, you know, stayed around forever and ever and ever, and everyone's familiar with it. But I want to get down to things that I feel like this community wants to hear, and I don't think you want to hear me ramble on about theories of grief. But if you are interested in them, you can definitely give a quick Google and get more information, or you can ask me and I can provide you with information that I have. So I'm going to skip past that because I have it in my notes, but I'm just intuitively not feeling like that's the route to go down. So let's move right along to lessons that can be learned from grief. And you're probably thinking, like, what lessons come from this? Like, I can't see the lesson in this. But I wanted to kind of show you an alternate perspective and provide you some ways in which we can actually take away lessons from this grieving process, right? So the first thing is that knowing and learning that grief has no timeline. And we talked about that just a little bit earlier. I cannot stress this enough, so I'm going to hammer it home once again. There is no timeline. There is no, like, okay, you've lost your job, or you've lost your loved one, or, you know, you've lost a friendship. You should be done mourning or grieving in 6 months' time. That's your allotted time frame. That's not the case. It takes as long as it takes. It takes as long as is needed. And I think the lesson here is that if you're going through those periods of grief and it's taking longer than you think it should, it's because there's stuff you haven't processed yet. You're not ready to move forward. You have to be ready to be able to move ahead in a healthy way and take those steps. So if you're still in that grieving process and you're wondering why hasn't it passed, it's because it's not over yet for you. But that doesn't mean it never will be. Okay. Number 2, another lesson that you can learn is that it's okay to still have fun and feel grief. I think people get this idea in their head that if they're going through a grieving process, they can't have fun, they can't laugh, they can't dance, they can't smile. They have to be in it. They have to feel it. But part of that process is trying to find those moments of joy, trying to find moments where you can smile and think of a memory and be okay with it and experience a sense of normalcy. I'll use that lightly because normal, what is normal? Who defines normal, right? But it's okay to still express joy even if you're in that, even if you're buried deep in that grief. In fact, it can be really cathartic and it can give you a break from feeling those deep, heavy feelings that typically accompany grief. So it's okay to give yourself permission. You know, a lot of people laugh at something and they think, oh my gosh, I shouldn't have, then they judge themselves, like I shouldn't be laughing, like I'm, you know, my grandmother just passed, I should be crying, I should be weeping, I should be in sadness. But it's still okay. And that's the lesson here in grief, that it's still okay to find peace and joy, little pockets here and there. Okay. A third lesson that we can learn from grief is that you will begin to understand who your true support systems are. Whether that's family, friends, colleagues, whoever it is, the people that are there no matter what, because it's not easy supporting someone that's going through a period of grief. It's really difficult. There's a lot of heavy emotion there. There's a lot of, you know, a lot of stuff going on beneath the surface in that person, and they aren't sunshine and rainbows. There's a lot of tears. There's a lot of heaviness. So to be able to support somebody and to be there through thick and thin, no matter what, that shows you who deserves to be sitting at your table. That shows you evidence that they have earned the right to be in your inner circle, because no matter what you're going through, they are right there with you, non-judgmental, investing their time to ensure that you're okay. So it's another lesson that comes from grief. The people that are there and that are really and truly there, not just pretending to be there, not just being like, oh, if you need anything, let me know, but the people that are actually there when things get hard, you learn very quickly who they are. So you can keep them closer. You can build your relationship with them. You can put your energy into those people. Number 4 is understand that anger is going to happen. It is to be expected. There are things that are going to set you off and that are going to aggravate you. Your propensity to be able to deal with everyday things is going to be shorter when you're going through a period of grief, right? So, and this is going to take you by surprise. I mean, you could think I'm having a good day, and then all of a sudden someone speeds in front of you and you are just in a full-blown rage, and you're thinking to yourself like, oh my God, why am I so angry? Why am I so angry? This is wild. And it's going to take you by surprise, but it's part of that grieving process, is to experience that anger. And it's because your ability to manage and deal with those everyday irritations or, you know, things that normally wouldn't get to you are going to get to you during this period. So be prepared for it. And when it happens, be okay with it. Give yourself permission to feel the anger. Give yourself permission to be like, okay, this was just a moment. I can self-regulate. I can ground myself. I can come back into my center and I can move forward. But just, I want you to learn this lesson because I don't want you to be surprised when it happens. And number 5 is exhaustion. Exhaustion. Being in an emotional state that is like this, that is heavy, that is, you know, challenging, difficult emotions, is going to take its toll on you physically, emotionally, and mentally, to the point where maybe you don't feel tired, but your body is tired. You're going to have moments where you need to take lots and lots of rest, And by the same token, you're probably going to have those moments where you have bouts of insomnia, where you can't sleep, where no matter how exhausted you are, your body can't, it can't settle. And I want you to kind of expect that your sleeping patterns are going to be off. So meet yourself where you are and understand that these things will happen. Take rest when you need to take rest. If you're having moments of insomnia, get up from where you are, because if you just keep laying in bed, you're going to keep staring at the ceiling. Your mind's going to go a mile a minute. Get up, do something different, which is something we've talked about a lot here in the community. Get up and read a book. Get up and put a load of laundry in, whatever it is. Just try and get away from the space you are in and clear your mind a little bit, right? So those are just some of the lessons I wanted us to learn in terms of like what you can get out of or what comes from grief. Because I want us to be prepared. Maybe some of you here in this community haven't experienced a loss like that, whether it's a loved one, job, career, friendship, whatever it is. So these are some of those little tidbits I want you to look out for when you inevitably come into a period of grief, because it is part of the human experience. It's one of those not so nice ones, but there is something we can take away. There is something that can be learned from grief. So let's get into kind of coping with grief and what some of those little like tips and tricks I have that have been really effective for me personally and for clients that I've worked with. So number one, and I love this, and I love that it put it this way, and I think this ties up everything really nicely in a bow. Please don't look at grief like a game of Monopoly or like a board game. Like it comes with a set of instructions, and this is what you're going to do for the first week. Like, and you're going to look at the 5 stages of grief. You're going to be like, okay, this is what it looks like. This is the instruction booklet. This is what I can expect, and this is how it's going to go. We cannot treat grief like a board game. It's going to look how it's going to look for you, and you just have to be there and be in the moment and be gentle and kind and compassionate to yourself as you're going through it. You aren't just simply a pawn that's trying to get to the end of the grief board game. That's not how it works. There's no instruction manual. You write the story of your own grief and what that looks like, and it's going to be very, very, very personal depending on the experience. So that's number one when you're coping with it, that it is not a board game to rush through. It's going to take the time it takes. And number 2 is that recognizing that life is never going to go back to what it was. It simply isn't. That is a fallacy. It's not just going to be like, okay, I've mourned the loss, I'm moving on, I'm just going to get back to the way things were before. You will be changed through this process, and you're supposed to. It's part of growth and development. As you deal with grief and learn lessons from it, you grow. Things will look different. You will be different. That reality that you once knew before your loss, before that grief, no longer exists. This new reality exists. So trying to force yourself back into the mold of what your previous life looked like or what life looked like before loss is really setting yourself up for disappointment, because you can never go backwards. All you can do is forge ahead and be like, okay, this is a part of my story. This is a part of what I've gone through. I'm going to take from it the lessons that I'm meant to take from it. I'm never going to forget the person or the experience or the situation that I lost, but I'm going to move ahead with my life and do so in a different way. And that's okay. That's, again, part of the human experience. So life is going to look different. That's another, way we need to cope with it, is knowing that going back is not really ever going to be an option. We need to go ahead with our new life and reestablish a new sense of normalcy for ourselves. So yeah. Number 3 is feeling your emotions. We live in a society, and I had this conversation with a client just yesterday, actually, that we live in this society that says to choke down your emotions, to not express them, to not show them, to have a stiff upper lip, to just be okay, to move on and not deal with them. But that is not reality. Grief comes with emotions. It comes with a wide variety and a huge spectrum of emotions. So being okay with feeling them, having your moments, allowing it to happen. If your outward expression is crying, giving yourself space to cry. If it's anger, allowing yourself to be compassionate in those moments of anger. If it's outbursts, if it's screaming, if it's being quiet or isolating yourself, whatever those emotions are, you need to be able to allow yourself to feel it. Because if you can't feel it, it's going to be really difficult to move on, because they're going to fester and they're going to fester, and slowly but surely those emotions will turn to anger, and the anger will turn to rage, and the rage will turn to outbursts, and then it'll just be so much more complicated to sift through it. If you allow yourself to ride the roller coaster because it's going to be up and down. Some days are going to be okay, sometimes you're not going to be okay, but if you allow yourself to ride the roller coaster and simply be present and be okay with where you're at and sift through it as it comes up, this process is going to move, it's going to move more organically than if you try and stuff your emotions down. I don't care what society says. Emotions are natural. They're part of what it means to be a human being, and we should not be forced to, nor should we have to keep those emotions to ourselves. Feel the emotions, feel them, and be okay with where you're at. Number 4, remember you can do hard things. I am talking about doing hard things all the time here because everybody in this group, everyone in this community has the ability to be extremely resilient and empowered. They, all of you, you included, you watching right now, have the ability to do hard things, and you've done it time and time and time again. Grief is one of those things. It's going to be a difficult moment in your life. It's going to feel like it's never, ever, ever going to end. Grief can feel like that, where it feels never ending. But you can get through this process. You can come out on the other side and redefine what life looks like after the loss. It is possible. You just need to keep that sense of hope and optimism in the back of your head. Even though it's hard, I know it's hard, trust me. If you've lost someone recently, you know it's hard, but there is the ability to do so. You can do hard things. I promise you, you can do hard things. And this is just another one of those hard things that you have to move through, okay? Number 5 is simply putting one foot in front of the other, taking every day, moment by moment, minute by minute, hour by hour, not trying to rush through the process, not trying to get to the other end as quickly as possible, but just simply being 1 minute to the next, because that's the only, especially if it's a profound loss, that's the only way to get through, is just be like, okay, can I get through to this next minute? If I can just get through to the next minute, if I can get through these next 5 minutes, it will support you along the way. Each of those moments will compound one on another, on another, on another, and at some point, the loss won't feel as heavy. The loss will begin to feel easier. It will begin to lighten. You'll be able to kind of come out of it, but it's got to be moment by moment. Don't rush through it. It's not a board game. You can't be finished in half an hour, okay? Number 6 is keeping memories alive. And this is another one of those things I think is different for everybody. Some people want to be able to keep the memories of a circumstance or a loved one alive. It brings them peace. It brings them the ability to reminisce and remember the lessons that you learned. Let's say it's a person, maybe keeping those memories alive by passing down, like, oh, my grandmother used to say X, Y, and Z to me, and that was something that was really important to her, and bringing those lessons with you. That's how you keep memories alive, right? And for some people, talking about it really helps them, whereas others, it's not as helpful, right? But we all can keep memories alive in our own way. If you're somebody that doesn't like to talk about it, like it's just too painful right now, what can you do? Maybe you light a candle, you know, every Saturday at 7 a.m. to remember the person, and it's very personal. Maybe you purchase like a crystal or something that commemorates them and you keep it near you, or you keep it on your person. Maybe, you know, you purchase a bracelet to keep the memory alive, or you wear a piece of their jewelry. I know when my Oma passed, my incredible aunts, oh, I'm going to cry. Okay, my incredible aunts gave me this amazing necklace that was hers, and I wore it for a really long time after she passed, until the chain went a little bit wonky. Now I keep it, but now I keep it with me. I keep it in my office space, and it's all the time there, so I can look at it, I can remember her, I can see it physically, right? So even those little tokens can help keep the person alive. You don't have to forget them. Even if it's a circumstance or a lost job, you can remember the good times, you can remember all your friends, and you can connect with them, but you can keep that memory alive in a way that feels good for you. And again, it doesn't seem to be like, you know, if someone's trying to be like, just talk about your grandma or talk about this so you'll feel better, it's not necessarily the case. Again, it's going to be personal, but find a way that works for you to keep the memory alive, whatever that might look like, right? Number 7 is knowing that seeking support is a-okay. You don't have to go through this process alone. There are people in your life that want to be there for you, that want to support you, that want to be a non-judgmental ear, that want to give you what it is you need and meet your needs as you transition or as you navigate this period of grief. It is okay to accept the help. You do not have to go through this alone. It might feel better, like I just want to be alone with my grief and I want to be just thinking about it by myself and I don't want anyone else to be there, and that's okay too. And if that's the case, it's important that you set a boundary around that and say to the person, I'm so appreciative that you want to be there for me. Right now I need to be alone. That's what I need. I need my space. But when I'm ready to have somebody enter into my bubble and support me, I will be sure to contact you. Or if you're willing to accept that support from a friend or a loved one, it's really clear to let them know what you're looking for. So if you're not looking to hear time heals all wounds, if you're not looking to hear get over it, you need to be really clear with the person and say, you know what I need from you right now, Sally? I just need you to be a listening ear. I just need you to be here with me, even if it's sitting in silence, even if it's just holding my hand while I cry or being there. That's what I need. And being really clear in setting those boundaries. Even just because they want to be there for you doesn't mean that they can do whatever they want or say whatever they want. You are still in control in terms of that. And it's up to you to set the boundary with them, right? And finally, number 8 is working with somebody to manage your grief. There are a lot of grief counselors specifically out there that specialize in this, that are really well versed in providing a lot of support in that capacity. I myself am not a grief counselor, but I do know of a few. So if you are looking for somebody, I can absolutely point you in the right direction. But don't be afraid to work with somebody. You know, I mean, me personally, even though I'm not a grief counselor specifically, can I support you through some of those challenging emotions and feeling them and being that listening ear that you need? Absolutely. So if that is what you're looking for, absolutely reach out to me. If you're looking for a grief counselor specifically, please reach out to me as well, because there is no shame in seeking support. In fact, for some people, it's absolutely necessary to get through. So with that, I hope, I went to 30 minutes still either way. It's a good thing I didn't talk about the theory of grief. Holy cannoli, we would have been here for another 10 minutes. Anyways, I want to thank you so much for being here. I want to thank you so much for coming week after week. If you have any questions with regards to grief, or if you have anything specific you want to ask me, please send me a message. I would be happy to chat with you. And with that, we are done for today. Believe it or not, time goes by fast. So I will see you next week, back to a regular schedule, Friday 11. And we will be discussing, oh crap, I can't remember. Oh, we will be discussing anger. So I will see you next time. Bye-bye.